do you think that also prevents, at least for the time being, any other type of action from China until they figure out a way to be self-contained, which they're not doing a great job of being self-contained economically.
Yeah, no, I think that's the biggest driving force, and it's going to continue. It's going to continue to, I would say, dictate, not even influence, dictate their decision to not do things beyond a certain level in with us. I think that, the hacking of airports, the hacking of, regional water and power grids and, throwing the balloons, like they're always testing the water. And I think the same thing with, the tens of thousands of fighting age male Chinese men with stacks of cash who are in good shape, who aren't looking for, a place to stay to get away from their country. They're here for a very obvious reason. Even with them, I've seen people, kind of fear mongering of saying, oh, they're going to build a Chinese paramilitary and help take over the country. They don't need to do that.
That's what Nick was saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, they really don't. I mean, like, could they? Sure. But like, there's way easier ways. Like, now, if those guys are going in to help facilitate EMPs or grid, neutralizations or, poisoning water tables or, what have you, maybe. I think it probably has more to do to facilitate with large scale hacking and things like that, where they're putting pop-up towers and, building networks to help facilitate a larger scale thing. I don't think you're going to see those guys trying to acquire machine guns and, doing like a conventional army kind of thing. That's just my opinion. But
we just had this kid, Nick Shirley, in here. Mm-hmm. Who does all these videos where he's down at the border and then he'll like come up to New York City and go to like the migrant centers and stuff. But do we still have that picture that he airdropped you of the Chinese directions? Do you have that?
Have it, yeah.
All right, let's see if we can pull this up. So this kid was just doing a video in San Diego where I'll fuck up the name of the town, but the place where they were, where there's a hole in the border or something, and they're always coming across, where, you have people from South America, and then a lot of Chinese people come through this area because they have like a set system of what they're going to do. And he's like, these are usually able-bodied, single Chinese males. So it's like, all right, I'm not trying to be like, oh, definitely espionage, but like somewhere in there is. Like some of them have to be. And so he had this document that he was able to get. How did he say he got it? Do you remember?
I think it was a migrant that he found it on the ground or something, because there were Chinese coming through, and I think he found it.
Right. So he got this document, and it was all in Chinese, and then he had it translated via like AI. And I told him get it double checked by a human, but but it mostly translates correctly. Do we have it on the screen? So this is it right here. We're going to zoom in on it. But I'm not going to go read the whole thing. I read it on that podcast with Nick. But essentially, this is like direct directions of what to do step by step when they get here, that, to make a long story short, ends with them going wherever the fuck they want in America, and doing it also, by the way, if they choose to follow these directions to a T, which many of them probably get like a quarter of the way through and then say I'm good and disappear off the map. But like if they follow it to a T, they're doing it in all legal protocols as well. Yeah. Like contact the lawyer to have this case go through when you get to this place, whatever. And I think about this, and this is where I do get scared. Like, all right, we're making it this easy. We already see the fentanyl wars coming across from the cartels, which is coming from China, the actual fentanyl itself. It's like you got an opium war, you got a potential espionage war going on the border. Like that is a what's that? Why am I forgetting words today? That's like I'm really at a blank for words, but like that's an aggressive action. These are aggressive actions. That's not what I'm looking for, but it's gonna get the job done. That we're seeing from one country to another, and we don't seem to be taking that seriously enough.
No, I agree. I mean, you see it it's not just Chinese. I mean, you see people from the Middle East, Egypt. I mean, you name it. There's people coming from all over the fucking planet right now that similarly are it doesn't look like you're a refugee, like they're in good shape, they're well fed, the clothes they have, like they're clean cut. So it's like, well, why are you here? I mean, yeah, I think it's pretty easy to ascertain and appropriate to do so, to think that, well, they're here for some specific reason. There's an intentionality to that many people that all look the same and are doing the same things and having directions. There's a reason that's happening. We can debate as to why that is. And again, my my opinion is that it's, to help facilitate, or in case of, if there needs to be a facilitation of something. But again, like when you look at that bigger picture, if China was to completely take over the country or demolish it, that's not going to be in their best interest. Now, that could certainly lend itself to saying, well, if enough of them come over here and kind of set up shop, plant their roots in and start building businesses, or, get elected to certain offices, or, what have you. Like, to me, that's a smarter play, and they're a very long game country that way. So I could see them doing something like that, where they're trying to influence our culture, they're trying to get into our politics, they're trying to start businesses, that they're trying to not assimilate into American culture, but do the exact opposite, because you've seen such a divisive component to even within the confines of our government, of, wanting to say, like, oh, diversity is our strength, and so we need to recognize everybody. We're not Americans. It's, you're Ukrainian, you're Cambodian, you're,
Right.
whatever. And that's a problem. So yeah, I think it's probably more, they're just trying to take advantage of it, because, for them to try to, infiltrate with enough people to, to match police and military and whatever, like, I don't think that's that realistic, in my opinion. But
Yeah. It's more. I agree. I think it's more the potential spy and information angle, because we know they've been doing that for a long time.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to your story. Which
Yeah.
we had a great, awesome tangent there to start off this podcast. With all that other stuff, I'm sure some things will come up along the way. But you had said you joined the Navy when you were 17, but you had to you officially when you were 18, because you have to wait until you're that age, right? Your
Correct.
parents have to sign for you or something at 17.
Yeah.
Okay, so you knew you wanted to go into special operations, which in that case within the Navy, I would imagine means going into the Navy SEALs. How far, how many years did you have to wait before you tried out for that, or did you go right away?
Pretty much right away. So back then, just being a SEAL, excuse me, wasn't its own job. At that time, there was what they called SEAL source ratings, which I want to say there was maybe 15 or so of them that were regular jobs in the Navy, that the Navy kind of deemed that it had something to do with being in the SEAL teams, or doing that in the SEAL teams could lend itself to, having some impact or what have you. So I looked at the list, and the first thing I saw was corpsman, and I was like, I want to do that. And they're like, yeah, we already have too many of them. It's basically closed right now. Pick something else. And so I was like, intelligence specialist. That looks cool. So I went through boot camp, then went through 5 months of intelligence specialist A school.
What did that comprise of?
What
kinds of things?
It's really big Navy stuff. And a little bit of it maybe lent itself to being applicable in the SEAL teams, but not much. At that time, this is again in 96, 97. So it was identifying Russian warships and planes from aerial imagery. It was reading aerial imagery from, TARPS pods off of F-14s. It was very kind of Cold War conventional carryover, big military intelligence gathering. So it wasn't anything super fancy or, fucking Jason Bourne like. It was neat, but so yeah, it was 5 months. Probably the coolest part of it was actually in Virginia Beach. Little Creek is kind of the main Navy base in Virginia Beach, or in Norfolk. Dam Neck is this smaller base, which is where SEAL Team 6 is at, which is also where intelligence specialists and operational specialist A schools are at. So being there, the SEAL Team 6 compound was right there, and you would see Team 6 guys working out in the gym or swimming in the pool, or running around the base, and you'd catch glimpses of them here and there, which was pretty motivating as a 18-year-old wanting to become a SEAL. It was cool to see the dudes at the pinnacle in all their fucking gear and whatever. So that was neat. Went straight to BUD/S after that, and started with class 214. Made it all the way through to third phase. And 1 week before the last portion, which is San Clemente Island, which is the last 5 weeks of training, I pinched my sciatic nerve really bad, and then just failed everything. So I got rolled for that, came back with 215, and graduated with him.
Wow. So you had to go through a lot of it.
I had to go through all of third phase all over again.
Whoa. Okay. So what age were you when you graduated? 20?
19.
Oh, you're still not.
Yeah.
So you're a Navy SEAL at 19.
No, so once you graduate, at that time again, Naval Special Warfare didn't have its own air program. Now you do static line and free fall like right after you graduate buds. Back then, you only got free fall as like a good deal school as you were a little more advanced, and it was later on you'd go through Fort Benning's traditional static line jump school in the Army at Fort Benning, and so went straight through that. Then you go through, at that time it was called STT, SEAL Tactical Training. Now it's SQT, SEAL Qualification Training, which is about another 4.5 months. And then you go to your SEAL team. I went to SEAL Team 3, and you have a 6-month probationary period where basically you have to show up and not get in trouble and, kind of prove day in, day out that you're a hard charger and a fast learner and, mouth shut, eyes open, ears open, whatever. And that you're not a tool bag. And then towards the end of that, you have to go around to every department and kind of get signatures from the department heads from, the Armory, from, first lieutenant, which is like boats and motors, and the air ops and, all the different kind of phases. And they have to basically say like, yeah, this guy isn't a total rim job. And then you go at this chief's board, which is, so you walk in, you're in uniform, and there's like 20 salty fucking older SEALs in there, and they can ask you anything, and they can keep you in there for 20 minutes. They can keep you in there for 5 hours. And so some of it is like, what's the cyclic rate of an M4? What's the safe blast distance on 4 pounds of fucking, PETN? What's the, packing procedure for, this parachute that we use for rubber ducks? What's the process for deflooding an outboard motor? Like, they ask you all these operational questions, and it's a lot, as a 19-year-old, like, you kind of get force fed, by the fire hose, like all of this information of weapon systems, of demolition, of diving, of jumping, of, boats and motors, you name it. And you have to know your shit on all of it. And so they'll throw you some oddball questions, but then they'll throw you like some morality questions, like, hey, we're on deployment and your chief is married, but he's banging this fucking Thai hooker. Are you going to say anything about it? And like, or, this happens in combat, and, there's a questionable fucking call, and, what are you going to do? How are you going to handle that or whatever? And so you've got to kind of navigate stuff like that. And again, they can ask you anything. I mean, they can ask you about your childhood, so sometimes that's one of those things where they're more than anything just getting a feel for what kind of fucking dude you are, and how you handle getting fucked with, how you handle technical questions, pressure that way. Like, are you going to fold if they start dogpiling on you? Like, it's more of kind of a psychological and social test than it is really asking questions. It's more kind of the vibe and how you're responding, how you're carrying yourself, and that kind of stuff. And then usually if they like you, they'll fuck with you towards the end. Like, the last question I got was pretty funny. It was, let's say, we're camping, just you and I, and, we're drinking one night, we're in the same tent, go to bed, we wake up the next morning and your ass is sore and you got a condom hanging out. And they're like, are you going to tell anybody? And I'm like sitting there like, what the fuck kind of question is this? And I'm looking around, I'm like, no, I'm probably not going to fucking say anything. And he goes, you want to go camping? So just dumb shit like that. But, usually they're only going to do that if they like you, and so then they're like, get the fuck out of here. And then,
this is at the end of that 6-month probationary period. End.
So you've been through buds, you've been through jump training, you've been through SEAL qualification training, 6 months of probation at the SEAL team. That's the final, like, yay or nay.
With the actual team you're going to be with, too.
Right.
And you chose to be with 3, or did they assign you there?
Both. I actually requested Team 2 was my first choice, 8 was my second, and 3 was my third. 2 and 8 are on the East Coast, but yeah, I got.
Where's SEAL Team 2?
In Little Creek.
No, but where do they usually deploy? Like, don't they have segments of the world each one deploys?
Not anymore. So back then they did. SEAL Team 2 was Europe basically, and some cold weather stuff.
Interesting.
Team 8 was strike platoons. They'd go on carriers and do kind of like the fast response or quick response type stuff. Team 4 was all South America. Excuse me. On the West Coast, Team 1 was Pacific, jungle training. Team 3 was all CENTCOM, desert warfare. Team 5 was cold weather, Alaska, North South Korea, kind of that whole contingent. So, and then you had the two SEAL delivery vehicle teams, which is all the mini sub stuff, and then SEAL Team 6 which is all, Tier 1 anti-terrorism stuff. So fast forward a few years, and they kind of redid everything to where now it's, every team it's kind of, same whore, different dress. There's no real difference between them, but
I always forget the evens are on the East Coast, the odds are on the West, or other way around.
Other way around.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
So odds are on the West Coast. 1, 3, 5, and 7 are West Coast. 2, 4, 8, and 10 are on the East Coast. 6 also, but it's not considered a regular Tier 3 SEAL team. It's a Tier 1 team. But
why is that?
As far as the tiers go, it's basically like it dictates funding and level of priority asset wise. So SEAL Team 6 doesn't do all of the same stuff that all the regular SEAL teams do. Their primary focus is anti-terrorism and like quick response, high level mission type stuff. So, the 20 years of extended combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan had basically, if you were a Navy SEAL deploying to those areas, you were doing generally the same stuff. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it varied deployment to deployment, team to team. The Team 6 guys would typically get like the higher value targets. They have more funding, better assets, tighter training. They're starting with guys who have multiple deployments, whereas at a regular SEAL team, you're always kind of going back to guys fresh out of BUD. So your lowest common denominator is a guy that doesn't really know a whole lot. So you're kind of hamstrung by the level that you can get. Plus their funding is way fucking better. I mean, they basically have a blank checkbook and they get to use the TF-160 assets and pretty much, they can trump anybody. Like, we're using this base, we're using this airplane, like they just kind of walk wherever and can do almost whatever they want almost. But, so yeah, that's kind of the gist on them. But
you wanted to be on, so you got on 3.
Yeah.
You said there were 3 that you like preferred, but you ranked them.
Yeah. Towards the end of, or I think in second phase, at least for us then, they would have you fill out your wish list or whatever. And they would come in, like a guy would give you a brief summary of each team and what they did and where they deployed and stuff, again, because there was a big difference at that time. And then they're like, here are your wish lists. And, there's classes where nobody gets what they want and it just needs the Navy. And, hey, this team needs every one of you guys to go. And sometimes a lot of people will get what they want. It really depends. But so they'll try to send you where you want to go if they can. If they can't, then they'll just send you where they need you. But
why'd you pick Europe?
So at that time, like your instructor cadre at BUDS is incredibly influential, as you can probably imagine. But like these guys, especially as an 18-year-old showing up and seeing the recruiting videos and, just the level of reverence that I had and respect for these guys was just like of mythic proportion. Like these guys were just like, these dudes are fucking gods and they walk on water and like you almost idolize them. But they kind of perpetuate that mythic type of status and reputation because they're just so good at what they do and they're all in good shape and they're fucking hard asses and they're funny and they're just cool fucking guys. Yeah. Like they walk around like it's hard to even explain, but it's like every room that every one of them walks into, you're just like, holy shit, like this guy just exudes fucking total badass. And so at least for me at that time, like all of our first phase instructors were Team 2 guys, or at least East Coast guys. Most of them were Team 2. And keep in mind, this is prior to 9/11, so this was right after the Bosnia stuff had gone down.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, the East Coast Team 2 guys, the Europe guys, were actually the busiest at that time. So it was like, these dudes are hard. They've been to Bosnia. Not that a whole lot happened there in terms of our involvement, but it was just like all my favorite instructors were Team 2 guys, and so it was like, that's where I want to go, And then there were a few that were Team 8 guys, so I was like, that's the next best choice. If I can't be on the East Coast, the desert warfare stuff seems cool. Again, there wasn't much going on. I mean, we were doing shipboardings a fair bit. And so like really the most consistent and predominant real world operations that were taking place at that time in naval special warfare were boarding ships that were defying the embargoes and smuggling oil. And so there was a fair bit of that going on. And so it was kind of cool to get to do VBSS and board these ships at night and take them down. And it was real world shit. It wasn't like huge resistance, you weren't getting in gunfights with them, but they would, foul the deck with motor oil and wrap barbed wire and shit over the railings and weld doors shut, and they'd make it a pain in the ass. But so that was kind of just what was going on, and so that was my mentality at that time.
So you ended up on Team 3 after this probationary period's over. You had done the 5-month course on Intel. So is that the specialty you're going in with as a Navy SEAL to Team 3?
It was, and I would say that was fairly rare for a fucking 20-year-old first platoon guy to be the intelligence rep. Usually it was a guy that had done multiple deployments that kind of knew how everything worked and, could go into the intel shop and knew the people in there and had done multiple deployments, knew how as a platoon intelligence rep, how you would gather intel for your platoon, where you would get it from, because he's done multiple deployments and stuff. My OIC, so certainly not a credit to me. I think he was just like, there aren't many ISs. You're an IS. That makes sense. You're the fucking intel guy. Don't fuck it up. I was like, holy shit. And so I'm in charge of like night vision lenses. And, at this time, in the late 90s, digital cameras had just kind of started to be a thing.
A big deal, yeah.
And they were like, the size of a fucking pizza box and super heavy. And it was like 1.2 megapixel pictures. And so a big component of what we do is special reconnaissance, whether it's in the desert, the jungle, wherever. And since we were a desert team, we did a fair bit of that long range reconnaissance patrols where, we'd spend 2 or 3 days hiking into a fucking a point and, get all of our hide sites set up with cami netting and sandbags and be all, sneaky into an area and then spend 3 or 4 days observing a fucking target that is a surface to air missile site or, whatever. And so,
what do you mean surface to air missile site?
So like at the time, again, like in any country that we're going to go into militarily, we're going to start with air campaigns. What's the biggest threat of an air campaign? It's twofold. It's the proliferation of surface to air missiles that can get past our systems, or there's so many of them that it overwhelms our defense systems and we can't deal with them. So our biggest threat initially is going to be our planes being shot down by surface to air missiles. So that's where kind of a classic special operations mission would be infiltrate into where, aerial imagery says that there's a surface to air missile site in these locations. So they'll send out all these teams. We're observing these targets and for a couple of days ensuring that, yes, that's a surface to air missile. Yes, it's active. It's being maintained. It's being monitored, what have you. And then, okay, hey, the air campaign is going to kick off. So now simultaneously, all of our dudes are going to do raids on these surface to air missiles. We're going to go down, do an L-shaped ambush, blow them up, fuck everybody up on target and leave. Then our planes come in and just roast everybody. So it's kind of a 1-2.
Like the 4th of July, baby.
A 1-2 punch. So the other thing is GPS and communication jamming equipment now, which over the last 20 years has become a much bigger threat for our Air Force and our air campaigns, but we don't, have anything to do with trying to combat that. That's all signals intelligence and, E2C Hawkeyes jamming shit in the sky and things like that. But
it's become a bigger threat, I assume, because other countries are just getting better technology.
Yeah, and just the technological advances of everything. So now we're focusing more on GPS and traditional communication independent navigation and communication systems that aren't relying on that shit, that are either crypto, they're closed and it's one-to-one end-to-end kind of stuff, or using navigation systems that don't rely on satellites and GPS that can be jammed.
So you were saying when you were coming in back, I guess in like 98 at this point, you're 96, it wasn't that common for them to assign basically a rookie like the Intel label. But is it more common now?
I don't think so. No, I think it's still pretty. Well, there's two things. One, I would say it probably never happens at this point, because now there are no intelligence specialists coming into BUDS. Everybody joins BUDS as a special operator, or what you're trying to do is become an SO. So back then, like, you'd have ISs and boats and mates and air traffic controllers and yeomen and you name it. You'd have all these different rates. So like when you're in uniform, even though you have your SEAL Trident pin on, your insignia that says your SEAL rate could be any of those things. Like the IS is like a quill and a fucking magnifying glass crossed. Now it's basically the trident without the eagle. It's like a flintlock, a trident, and the anchor. You know, it's just those three components is the insignia for SO or special operator. So so now that there's not, you know, somebody with any intelligence training showing up, I can't imagine they would ever put a brand new guy as an intel department head. But
yeah, I was trying to remember our mutual friend Remy Adeleke. He was human intel, right? But maybe he didn't come in as that.
Right. So that program is post, like after you've been in the SEAL teams. It's kind of its own. It's not a rating in the Navy. It's a special project that exists in naval special warfare. So it's totally different. But
you guys keep track. You remember all this stuff so perfectly. There's so many different layers to the military. I could do a million podcasts and still be like, wait, what was that thing again?
Well, the neat thing about that is that, you know, for any of us, like it's second nature. You know, it's like you don't even really have to remember things. It's just you live it for long enough to where you just understand it. And that's what baffles me about like the stolen valor stuff. Like it's so fucking easy to catch somebody lying about that because of that. Is like if you haven't lived that and you don't know it, like it's I would say there's a 0% chance that you're not going to fuck it up somewhere. Yeah. You know, whether it's the wrong Bud's class or, you know, whatever. It's like, oh, who did you know? Like even if they say, oh, I was in Bud class so-and-so, who was your LPO? Who was your class proctor? Who, you know, fuck, I don't remember. Like I know you weren't a SEAL then because you don't forget that shit. You know, so, and you see it all the time. I mean, there was a funny joke even back when I was going through. It's like at any given time on average, there's like 2,000 to 2,300 active duty SEALs, you know, and then in Vietnam, you know, because this was, you know, again in the 90s where the Vietnam frogmen were probably the most stolen valor oriented group. You know,
really?
A lot of people would say I was a SEAL in Vietnam in the 90s. And so one of the jokes was like there was, you know, over the course of the entire Vietnam War, there were, you know, 4,300 SEALs in Vietnam, and I've met all 97,000 of them, you know, and because they're just fucking everywhere, you know. It's just, but it exists today, you know, especially with the internet. People know more, and so they're closer to pulling it off, but it's still, I would say, woefully lacking in terms of the finite details that makes it easy to distinguish whether or not somebody actually was a SEAL or not.
Yeah, it's always a shame when you see that, obviously, when people are trying to say things they didn't do. My one thing as a civilian from the outside that does bother me, though, sometimes is when I see the military eat their own and jump to conclusions on stuff. I mean, I don't get it. Yeah, I've seen it up close, like with people I've had in this studio, and then I see the facts, and I'm like, guys, don't you know, why do we got to do this?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I would say even on a broader point, you know, Chad Wright, I don't know if you know who he is.
Chad Wright?
Yeah, he'd be a great guy to have on here. He was a SEAL. He's been on my show. It's been a couple of years now, but he's a ultra marathoner and a really, really devout Christian and just a super, super interesting and good and cool guy. He looks like Forrest Gump right before he turned around to stop running. He does. I mean, you can fucking pull him up. Like that's exactly what he looks like. Always wearing running shorts. I mean,
oh, yeah. Oh, you know what? I have seen this guy.
Yeah. Dude, you should 100% have him on the show. He's a fucking awesome dude.
Yes, I have seen this dude.
Actually, on the flight here, I watched a video that he put out just in the last week or so, kind of addressing that. And I think he summed it up spectacularly with basically saying, you know, like by doing that, by criticizing and questioning and accusing fellow service members, like you're part of this flawed system that the military has brainwashed you and made you become, which is thinking that the best part of your life was spent doing the thing in the military. And a big travesty is guys who get out and aren't willing to share their story for fear of retribution or accusations or what have you. And so you've got all this wisdom and all these really, really poignant, powerful life lessons that are not being shared because people don't want to get thrown under the fucking bus and be accused of lying or, you know, whatever. And the way that he spends like 10 minutes just in a one take rant, and it's just masterfully well done. And you know, maybe you start that out with, you know, him talking about that on here, but I agree completely. And I you know, have kind of made a very intentional point to never, you know, publicly take a position on a guy, you know, other than just being supportive, because to me, fucking life's hard enough, you know, and you know, one of the things that gets brought up quite often is, you know, guys, especially in the SEAL community, if they write books or they, use the SEAL brand and kind of weave it into their brand, and is that they're pimping the Trident, they're whoring it out, and they're making money off of the SEAL teams and what have you. And to me, you know, there's some nuance there that I would say is really important, which is, you know, at what point or where do you draw that line? Because I would say, you know, if you're saying, if you're filling out a job application for anywhere, or you're putting a resume together and you say that you were a Navy SEAL and that contributes to you being hired, which you absolutely fucking know that it's going to, no matter what you do, even has nothing to do with special operations or what have you, is that it you know, it displays a certain character and a caliber of man that has that on his resume. Is that what's the difference? You know, at that point, you're really just talking about levels of magnitude in terms of financial influence. You know, so whether you write a book and you have a fucking big trident, gold trident on it, and you get "I'm a Navy SEAL" tattooed on your lower back, I mean, whatever. Which I don't know who the fuck would do that. I hope there's at least one guy.
You gonna turn around and show us a tramp stamp with a Navy SEAL trident on it?
If you put something else in this mug, I might, and you give it long enough to set in, I just might show you all kinds of shit. But yeah, but I agree with his point entirely, and I just think, you know, A, life's hard enough. B, like, there's such a small group of dudes. C, you weren't fucking there. D, everybody has their own. I mean, you can get in a car accident, right? And the two people of what their experience was vastly fucking different. You know, even if there's traffic cams and dash cams, you know, so to be like, this guy's full of shit, he's a fucking liar, and he fucking, you know, like, I just, you know, to me, it's like, my first question would be why? Like, A, who made you the fucking gatekeeper of the community? Nobody. Like, nobody voted on making you the guy that's supposed to fact check people. And two, like, what's your angle with it? Like, what do you gain by doing it? And you know, where's the motivation? You know, to me, one of my favorite sayings, because the dog industry is pretty similar that way, where there's a lot of eat your own, shit talking, clicky, you know, fuck that guy, he doesn't know what he's doing. You know, there's a lot of professional jealousy or hatred or what have you, and it just drives me nuts. And one of my favorite adages in reference to both of those situations is, you know, blowing out somebody else's candle doesn't make yours shine any brighter. And to me, like, you could apply that to pretty much every aspect of life. It's like, you know, there's enough out there for everybody. Like, Jocko or Goggins or Sean or me, or I mean, anybody being successful, there's not a finite amount of success that can be had. And by, you know, trying to drag other dudes through the mud, one, you look like a 12-year-old fucking schoolgirl who's, you know, gossiping about your friends, and two, like, it's not helping you out at all, you know? So I just don't get it.
Yeah. So a couple things there. Number one, as long as you're not lying about what you did, if you serve the country and have good lessons or examples to provide to other people from that, and you can do that through the work you do, and you can do that and make money doing that, being a best-selling author like you are, or having a podcast like you do, or things like that, I don't know why anyone has a problem with that. That blows my mind. Secondly, you make the point about how different people can experience the same thing in a different way, and then things can get twisted that way. Well, I don't remember it like that, or I don't remember it like that. You know, that's why I think what guys like you and Sean are doing is so valuable, because essentially, you know, and you have on different guests too, but you have on a lot of veterans, and you guys both have on a lot of veterans specifically from like the global war on terror era. And like, we are getting an oral history of that era from people who were in the Marines, people who were in the infantry, people who were in the Army Rangers, people who were in the Navy SEAL, all these different people who had different roles in Afghanistan, Iraq, and the like. And like, I think that's so important and such a big service, because that way at least people can maybe put things together and see like, oh, it was different for these guys and from these guys. And then they may think, even like some veterans may think when they see this stuff like, oh, maybe I am jumping to conclusions on other people and I shouldn't be, you know, talking about this.
Well, yeah, and I agree. I think the one kind of tricky part there is, and I'm not saying it's okay to lie, but when one guy thinks that didn't happen, he's lying.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's where it's always justified, is like, well, I don't have a problem with him being successful. I have a problem with him lying about what he did or didn't do, or, you know, or whatever. And so that's where the tricky part is. And so, you know, for me at least, like, if I wasn't there, I'm not going to have a fucking opinion on it, period. You know, like, that's just the reality of it. And by there, I don't mean like I was in country at the same time, or it was our sister platoon and they were in this town. Like if I wasn't on the fucking mission, you're not going to get an opinion from me on it in terms of what went down and whether or not it shook out the way somebody said or not, because it's not my fucking business, and it's not my story to tell. So I don't understand why people spend so much time arguing and slinging mud at one another about it. It's pretty irritating.
Yeah, hope to see it slow down. But anyway, we left off where you were getting in actually to Team 3.
Yep. And
coming into service. So you had mentioned this, but it was an interesting time because this is, I guess, like 4 years before 9/11, give or take. The only thing, so to speak, that had really been going down publicly was all the balkanization in Europe. And at the time, Al-Qaeda was kind of like this thing the intelligence community was tracking, but a lot of people weren't making a big deal out of it. And then in the late 90s, some attacks overseas happened. There was the embassy bombing, and then there were one or two others, and then I believe there was the USS Cole. Right. And was that your first mission, going to the Cole? Or did you do things before that?
Yeah, I mean, that was my first, I would say, real taste of violent extremist terrorism and the impact that it had on the United States and the military. And that was in 2000, but October of 2000. And so,
can you explain to people what that was for who don't know the history?
Yeah, so one of our faults, I think, is that, and again, pre 9/11, I think it was a lot easier to understand why we were so complacent. Not that it's an excuse, but it's at least an understanding. I mean, whether, like, even take the Bud's base, like there was no gate guard at night prior to 9/11. Like anybody could just drive on the fucking Bud's compound base. There was nobody standing guard duty, which is weird to think of now. It's like it's impossible to even imagine now.
Yeah.
So like that is kind of a classic example. But another, I would say, equally ridiculous thing that we were doing is that within the confines of the military and the war machine that exists, you have USNS ships, which is United States Naval Ship. It's not a USS ship. So the USS are combative vessels. USNS ships are supply vessels, tankers, etc. And so both USNS ships and even USS ships would pull into ports all over the world for resupply. And so that's what happened in the Gulf of Aden in Yemen, is the USS Cole was pulling in for a resupply, which, again, like thinking of that now, it's like, what? But yeah, you let, the Yemenese port of Aden, pull 2 fucking tugboats up next to the Cole and push it into a spot where they're going to unload pallets of food and water and fuel. And again, it's like it's impossible to even think that was something that happened, but it did all over the world. And so, Al-Qaeda, being who they are and taking advantage of the things that they take advantage, saw that as an easy target. And so that's what they did. So they basically took a couple thousand pounds of explosives and laden this little tugboat, or what looked like a tugboat, and then replaced one of the tugboats, got up alongside it, started pushing it in, and then clacked themselves off and blew a fucking massive hole in the side of the ship and almost sunk it. It killed 19 U.S. Sailors. Damage control-wise, the mechanisms within the ship were competent enough and quick acting enough to shut different things down and make it to where the ship didn't sink.
How did they do that?
So, going back to World War II, even with torpedoes, like there are very specific protocols for taking on water at different points of the ship. And so they can close hatches and shut things down to compartmentalize it so that it doesn't just run through the entire boat. So that's the gist of it. It's called damage control, which there's an actual job called D-Seaman, which that's their entire fucking job is to mitigate, damage and control it on a ship for instances like that. So they were Johnny on the spot, got it all under control. Now it was like half sunk and listing to one side real heavy, but it didn't sink. And so the goal was for Al-Qaeda was to sink it entirely. So the fact that they didn't sink it pissed them off. And then so they kind of vowed, even the Marban open radios were threatening, saying, the ship is not leaving the harbor. We will fucking sink it.
After they bombed it.
Right. And so we had just gone from Australia to Bahrain. So we're sitting in Bahrain waiting to do a bunch of exercises and desert warfare training. That happens. So we jump on the USS Tarawa and haul ass down there.
How fast were you able to get there?
It took like a day and a half, I think. Not super far, but the Tarawa is a big amphibious ship. It doesn't go terribly fast. And maybe even a couple days. I'm not even sure. But so we get down there, and then so for 63 days straight, our tasking is from sundown to sunup. We're going to be in 2 different boats that are circling the ship, and then we're going to have a 60 gunner, a law gunner, a sniper, and a comms unit, and a couple other guys that are just armed with regular M4s on the ship, maintaining a security presence and not allowing them to come finish sinking it. So for 63 days we did that, and it was an eye opener for sure. I mean, number one, like all of the power was shut down. You have 19 dead bodies that are mangled and buried in this ship that's sitting.
They're buried in the ship.
Yeah, like they're all, all like in different compartments of the ship that are shut down with 90-degree salt water submerging. Like, so you can imagine what that smelled like.
Oh, because they had to close it.
Yeah,
yeah.
So
Shit.
all of those dead bodies were still compartmentalized, and some of them lodged, in different parts of the ship.
Oh.
And then you have, an entire galley's worth of food that's now not refrigerated for 2 months.
Wait, so for 63 days they had that? There wasn't a way to like...
No, I mean, like at that point, so what we were waiting on was a floating dry dock, which was, I think, called the Marlin Spike, came all the way from Mississippi. It had to get, and then we had to drag as a country, we had to get the coal out into international waters, get it loaded up onto this floating dry dock, and then send it back to Mississippi and have it completely redone, and which it did, and then ended up, now it's back in the fleet and deploying again. But
and that's where they take the bodies out in Mississippi.
Yeah, yep. So yeah, for that 2-month period, it was pretty dicey, and there were a few different instances where they would kind of test the waters and try to infiltrate our circle of trust, if you will, and
like on a tugboat, or
no, like on little motorboats. They'd come in, or even like these little dong miniature fucking ships that they would try to sail in or whatever. They're just poking and trying to see if they could get past, and we never ended up opening up on anybody. There were a few times where we came real close, but if they came anywhere near our kind of invisible fence, if you will, we would haul ass out there and draw down on them and what have you. But
where were you usually sitting again?
I was on one of the little boats that was floating around in the water that whole
like
time.
How close to the boat to the coal?
I mean, we would be right up alongside it and all the way to probably 350, 400 yards outside of it.
And how many guys did you say it was again from the SEALs doing this?
16 total. So you'd have probably 10 of them on the ship, and then 3 in each boat with our special boat unit guys driving the boat, and a guy on either a 50 cal or a Mark 19 grenade launcher. And
doing it in shifts because you're doing it 24/7, or
sundown to sunup, and so just one long shift, like we were.
Oh, so you weren't worried about it overnight?
No, we were. I'm sorry, from sundown to sunup.
Did I get that wrong?
Yeah. So, so during the day, the Marines did that. So
got it. Okay.
Daylight, the Marines had it. Nighttime, we had it. And so, yeah, we would, at dusk, we would head that way. We take over the watch. Sun comes up, they relieve us. We go back out to the boat. So yeah, 7 days a week, 63 days straight, we did that. And then they finally got it out to the Marlin Spike and got it loaded up. There was one instance on the way while it was being tugged out to sea, a small other boat was hauling ass straight towards it, and we thought that they were going to try to do one last ditch effort thing, and it ended up being a Yemeni patrol boat that we boarded and almost shot everybody on it, like, because they were military guys, or there were a few military guys.
But you weren't sure?
Well, I mean, it's just like they're in military uniforms, they have weapons, and so we take over the tug and flood it and then taking it down, and these guys are all just like, holy shit. And there was one officer in particular who they all just had pistol belts on with pistols, so they weren't standing there with AKs or anything, but he starts to fucking put his hand on his gun, and myself, Clint and Shane, two of my closest friends, all just swarm him and get our guns right up in his fucking grill and come off safe, and just getting ready to fucking plug him. And then he's like, no, you know what, I'm going to put my hands back up. And so it was, they didn't recognize who it was, so they were responding thinking this was some unknown whatever, just basically I don't know that I'd even call it a miscommunication. We didn't really feel like it was our job to let them know that we were doing that, and they saw something on the radar out there that they didn't recognize, so they were going to check it out. But so it wasn't really a big deal. But
was that the first time you ever put a weapon in somebody's face on
for
duty?
For real, yeah.
Yeah, for real.
Oh well, I say I did it a number of times in the water prior to that. Boats that would come up, we would draw down on them and stuff, but nothing ever happened.
Did it jack your adrenaline though?
Yeah, I mean a little bit. The one I wouldn't say nice thing. The thing about training to a certain level of conditioning is that it becomes like a conditioned response, really. And so, yes, the adrenaline is there, but it's kind of graduated and it does level off a fair bit. It's not like the first time you jump out of an airplane or, whatever. It's not as crazy just because you're kind of so used to doing that stuff. Still there, just not.
Yeah. And during those 63 days, you have the 19 guys who perished who are still, their bodies are stuck in there. But then you had a whole ship. I would imagine the whole crew was still there, no?
Yeah. Yep.
How many guys, approximately?
A couple hundred.
So, I mean, what was their vibe after that? Just like shell shocked?
Yeah. Yeah. And, it was weird because the first couple nights we were there, we actually stayed on the ship. We stayed, like, you do the math, there's 16 of us, there's 19 dead people. So there's 19 open racks and we're sleeping in them.
Oh my God.
And so it's like we're laying there and these, like you look across and, on a Navy ship, it's not very big. I mean, they'd have 18 fucking dudes in a room this size, just fucking stacked on top of each other in small racks. And so, like you're laying there and like you can just feel this motherfucker eyeballing you and you look over and he's just like, staring at you with the 1,000-yard stare, like fucking crying or, whatever. And you're just like, Jesus Christ, like throw the curtain close. And, so, and of course, the SEAL teams being the band of Vikings that we are, there's of course some dudes jerking off in those racks and being total fucking savages, having no respect for anything. But so yeah, that's the fucking Navy. For
I guess you weren't one of them.
I was not one of them.
Okay,
I mean, I would tell you if I was, but it was my first deployment. I'm fucking 20, 21 years old. I mean, it was impactful. Like to me, that was the last thing on my mind. But,
yeah.
But we had some dirty bastards that were a little older and just didn't give a shit.
I guess so. Did you like? Do you remember talking with any of those guys though? Like some of the ones that lost their friends.
A little bit. And the humbling thing, I think, for me was how appreciative they were that we were there. Because I think, a Navy ship doesn't have much by way of armament. And a ship that small doesn't have any Marines on it. There's no, I mean, like there may have been a couple of MPs with pistols at most. Everything else is like whiz guns and tomahawks and shit, that you don't see anyway. So, had it been on an amphib where there's 1,500 fucking armed Marines, then it would be different. But, so to see all of a sudden 16 dudes in full kit with fucking long guns show up ready to fuck people up, I think for them was a huge sense of relief. Yeah. So they were just super grateful and appreciative and very welcoming. And, they didn't have much that they could offer us or help us out, but they did. It's like anything we can do to help. We don't have much, but whatever. And so that was kind of a neat thing that you're. It's always that way in the military and training. Like you're all on the same team, and it's a very uniting experience when you're going through the different trials and tribulations of training that are tough and whatever. But now when it's real and there's dead bodies around and stuff, it's just different,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so that like it was kind of just a reassuring, very uniting experience interacting with those guys.
And this is the call was, what did you say, October 2000?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what it was? Okay, so you guys were the desert team. You had obviously been in that now for a couple of years. How much before the call did you know about / were like really read in on behind the scenes on Al Qaeda?
Very little. As an intel guy, I was at least familiar with them. I would say most of the platoon guys probably if they had heard of them, they'd heard of them, and that was it. Had very, very little concept as to who they were, what they were trying to accomplish, and they knew that they existed, knew that they had bombed a couple embassies in Kenya and Tanzania a couple of years ago, but that was really about it. So
were you guys focused more on like countries and governments at the time?
Sort of. I mean, for us, strangely enough, or maybe not strangely enough, after explaining it, at that time, especially because the SEAL teams were so AO oriented, areas of operational expertise, et cetera, because it's like we're focused on the Middle East. Well, what's going on in the Middle East? Oil embargo, smuggling. So that was our focus. Now, if you were to talk to the Team 1 guys, what are you guys doing? Well, we're going down to South America doing counter narcotic stuff against Colombia, cartels and whatever. That's what they're focused on. So if it's not directly involved in what's going on there, like you don't really need to know. And so you're not going to really waste any bandwidth worrying about it or even learning about it. So you want to be as good as you can at whatever it is in the front sight focus of what you're focused on. And that's kind of the deal. Now, on September 12th, that all changed. Right. Now every fucking dude is buying, any book they can and, reading anything that they can, open source, even on the TSSCI side of, pulling intelligence on these groups. Now it's a whole different fucking ball game. And if you think of Al-Qaeda as kind of the hub, you're looking at any fucking thing that can spiderweb back to them, to include in the Pacific, specifically the Philippines. You had the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, which ironically is MILF. which they don't know that, which I find fucking hilarious. And then the Abu Sayyaf group, who's more prominent in the southern third of the country down in Mindanao, and they were basically an Al Qaeda affiliate or sympathizer, and were running a lot of Islamic extremist terrorist operations against the Philippine government and going back and forth from Indonesia, which is a pretty big hotbed. And so, yeah, as soon as that happened, now we're putting all those pieces together. But
you said September 12th right there. You're referring to September 11th, obviously.
Right.
But for you, though, and your guys who got there in October 2000, and you 63 days looking at the remains of what Al-Qaeda just did, were you guys...
For sure more focused on them, but not from a spiderweb standpoint, because it was specific to Yemen. Again, it's almost impossible or at a minimum very difficult to even try to put yourself in a mindset where your only understanding of Al-Qaeda is bombing one fucking USS ship in one country one time. So if you can try to imagine that's the only thing then you're going to focus on Yemen. You're going to focus on Al-Qaeda, but Al-Qaeda Arabian Peninsula, or AQAP, versus Al-Qaeda in even in Afghanistan is a big difference, and post 9/11, it became an even bigger difference. It was almost like, it's like you're under the same franchise, but two totally different goals. It's like, yes, on paper, our methodology and our ideology is essentially the same, but what we're trying to accomplish and where we're doing it is vastly different. So, yes, like the spotlight was a lot brighter on Al-Qaeda, but it was more specific to, okay, well, the coal got bombed in Yemen. What are they doing in Yemen? And so, yes, there is they're also operating out of Afghanistan. Looking back on it, I think my assumption at that time was that Afghanistan was more of the headquarters safe haven where, hey, our hands aren't dirty. We're just hanging out here, and different shit's being planned from there, which, was accurate. But, our understanding of how deep those roots went in Afghanistan was pretty limited at that time, even after that.
Did you have any dealings with Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda-linked operations between the Cole and September 11th?
No.
Okay.
Well, no. I mean, what I will say, after we got the Cole out and on its way back to the United States, so that obviously made us adjust our policy as it relates to resupply and okay, now what are we going to do and how are we going to do this? So they basically shut everything down worldwide, and they made one port. They kind of looked at logistically, where can we put one spot that's going to be the most conveniently located given all of the things that we have going on, and it was Dubai, or actually Jebel Ali, which is by Dubai in UAE. So that was now going to be the one spot that USNS and USS ships actually, and they were smart about it. So they said, okay, USS ships are not going in port anywhere. USNS ships will go into these ports. They will get all of the supplies, and then they'll go do an underway replenishment with the USS ships out at sea, out in international waters. So you're never putting USS ships in there. There's no combatives, no active duty military personnel whatsoever. All of the USNS ships are merchant marines. They're civilians, not that their lives aren't important, but from a juiciness of target standpoint, they're nowhere near as valuable as, an active duty fucking sailor or marine. So our job was then to go, we stayed in Dubai for like 5 weeks. Of course, it was during Ramadan when everything's fucking closed. Which is probably better for us, honestly, if we're being honest. But
no good food stands open?
Yeah, nothing was open. But so Jebel Ali is where the port is. We're staying in Dubai. So we're going back and forth. Every time a USNS ship comes into port, we go in ahead of time. We sweep the entire warehouse.
Wow.
We scuba dive and dive under the tugboats and vet them. We've got sniper overwatch on the tallest tower there. We're in civilian clothes, relaxed grooming standards, concealed weapons, bullshit names or stories basically while we were there. So it was a neat kind of taste of that, like, oh, it's a little more shadowy, more unconventional kind of special operations type of mission because it was, a little more secretive and what we were doing was fucking important, So we stayed there for, like I said, about 6 weeks. While we were doing that, they were setting up basically like a TDY or like a temporary duty station billeting where they would send a contingent of EOD guys and supply clerks and, and set up kind of a more permanent shop. We did it as kind of a Band-Aid until they could backfill and get an actual shop set up. So, we would work every other day or so, and it was busy, but it was cool to be a part of that. And then that was kind of the gist of it. So it wasn't really responding to Al Qaeda because at that point, they had gotten away with kicking us in the dick pretty well. And so they kind of scattered like cockroaches a little bit for a little while until 9/11, which was less than a year later. So I think, after they did that, it's like, okay, we can hit the dragon in the mouth. Let's do it on a higher scale. And they kind of retracted everything, focused everything on September 11th, and then pulled it off.
Where were you on September 11th?
So I was being on the West Coast, and it was fairly early. While I was getting ready, I was at SEAL Team 3 in a platoon. It was between my first and second platoon. And I remember seeing it on the news, the first plane hitting, and it was actually, there was no video. It was just like, oh, a small plane ran into the tower, and it was like, yeah, that's fucking dumb. That sucks, whatever. I get in my car. I'm halfway to work on Interstate 5, going down to San Diego. I was living in La Jolla at the time. And then all of a sudden over the radio, it's like, interrupts. And it's like a second plane just hit the other tower and we're under attack. And I was just like, holy fuck. So I kept going to work. By the time I got there, they had every gate shut down. They were basically every motherfucker that was coming through the gate, pulling them out of the car, going through their car like it was a full narcotics traffic stop. And so it took like 4 hours to get on base for most people.
Oh, you're just in like the traffic stop.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. This whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm listening to most of it on the radio. So then I get into the SEAL team, into Team 3, and it's, to say the tension and vibe was different is obviously a woeful understatement. So it was just weird. It's hard to describe. I mean, it was this feeling of being angry and I wouldn't even say nervous, but like anxious, but in I want to go fucking kill these fucking people type of way. It was like an unsettled restlessness, that was just pervasive. It was very quiet. And everybody just was like, it's fucking go time. Like, shit's going to get real fucking right now and get your shit basically. And so, everybody's in their lockers, like going over their shit and sharpening knives and, fucking going through their stuff and double, triple checking everything and just trying to sharpen the sword to the best of our ability and get as ready as we can without any actual direction yet.
How quickly did you know it was Al Qaeda? Do you remember like
pretty
when
much
you
right away?
You knew right away, like yourself.
I mean, all of us were like, it's them, and then our intel shop is like, yeah, it's them, So yeah, it was immediate, I mean, everybody assumed it, and then they confirmed it, pretty much right away. But the frustrating part was then it was like, the days afterwards and the collapse of the towers and digging through the rubble. And like, it was this, all right, let's go fucking do it. And then it was like, no, we're going to wait, and then it just kind of drug on and on and on. And I think frustrated a lot of us. Like we all wanted to just go there like right now and start doing it. And we didn't,
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.